Black mom returns her daughter's birthday cake, CEO behind her says. Rewrap it. She deserves it. The brass bells above Sweetmore Bakery's glass door chimed cheerfully as Danielle Carter stepped inside, her 8-year-old daughter Ava trailing close behind. The warm scent of vanilla and cinnamon should have been comforting, but Danielle's stomach churned with dread. In her hands, she clutched a pink bakery box containing what was supposed to be her daughter's dream birthday cake, a 3-tier princess castle complete with edible glitter and fondant turrets. Instead, what lay inside was a lopsided disaster that looked like it had been assembled by a blindfolded toddler. Mama, are we really returning my birthday cake? Ava whispered, her small voice barely audible above the ambient chatter of other customers. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, held a mixture of confusion and disappointment that made Danielle's heart ache. Just for a few minutes, baby, Danielle replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. They're going to fix it for you, okay? You deserve the most beautiful princess cake in the world. The bakery buzzed with Saturday afternoon energy. Well-dressed families browsed glass display cases filled with perfect pastries, while baristas crafted elaborate coffee drinks behind the counter. Danielle noticed how easily other customers seemed to belong here, how confidently they pointed at expensive items without checking price tags twice. She straightened her shoulders, reminding herself that she had every right to be here. She'd saved for 2 months to afford this cake, working double shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant. The line moved slowly, giving Danielle too much time to rehearse her words. She'd practiced in the car, trying to strike the right balance between polite and firm. All she wanted was what she'd paid for, nothing more, nothing less. Behind her, she became vaguely aware of another customer joining the line. A tall man in an expensive-looking navy suit, checking his phone with the casual air of someone accustomed to being important. She didn't turn around, focused instead on the approaching counter and the conversation she dreaded having. Finally, it was her turn. Next, called out a thin, middle-aged man behind the counter. His name tag read, Mr. Green, manager, in bold letters. His pale eyes swept over Danielle dismissively before settling on the pink box in her hands. Good afternoon, Danielle began, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. I ordered this cake for my daughter's birthday, but there seems to have been some mistake with the decorating. I was hoping you could. Let me see. Mr. Green interrupted, his tone already edged with impatience. He opened the box, and his expression immediately soured. This is exactly what you ordered. A Princess Castle cake, just like you specified. Danielle blinked, taken aback by his dismissive tone. Actually, no. I showed your decorator a picture from your website. The cake was supposed to have 3 even tiers, purple and pink fondant, and edible pearls around the base. This. She gestured to the crooked, poorly decorated mess. This doesn't look anything like what I ordered. Mr. Green's jaw tightened, and when he looked at her again, there was something cold and calculating in his eyes. Ma'am, you ordered our premium princess package, which costs $180. Now you're here complaining because it's not perfect enough for your standards? The accusation stung, but Danielle maintained her composure. I'm not complaining about perfection. I'm asking for what I paid for. Look at this cake. The towers are crooked, the frosting is uneven, and half the decorations are missing. Any reasonable person would see this isn't what was advertised. Several nearby customers had begun to notice the commotion. Danielle felt their eyes on her, and heat crept up her neck. This was exactly what she'd hoped to avoid, a public scene that would embarrass both her and Ava. Mr. Green leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to what might have sounded conversational to anyone not paying attention, but Danielle caught the cruel edge underneath. Listen, I think there's been a misunderstanding here. You ordered the premium package, but clearly you can't afford it. People like you should stick to cheap cupcakes from the grocery store instead of wasting everyone's time with complaints about cakes you probably can't even pay for. The words hit Danielle like a physical blow. The bustling bakery seemed to fade around her as the meaning of people like you sank in. Around them, conversations quieted as other customers sensed the tension, their uncomfortable glances confirming that they'd heard every word. "Excuse me?" Danielle's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a warning that Mr. Green chose to ignore. "You heard me," he continued, emboldened by what he mistook for weakness. "I see customers like you all the time, eyes bigger than your wallet, ordering expensive items you can't afford, then trying to return them for made-up reasons. Well, not in my store. This cake is exactly what you deserve for what you paid." Behind Danielle, she felt rather than saw the man in the navy suit step closer. She was too shocked to turn around, too focused on the humiliation burning in her chest and the way Mr. Green was looking at her, like she was something distasteful he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. But it was Ava's small gasp that finally broke through her stunned silence. "Mama?" Ava tugged at her mother's hand, her young voice trembling with confusion. "Why is he being mean to us?" The innocent question, asked with such genuine bewilderment, nearly undid Danielle completely. She looked down at her daughter, her brilliant, beautiful, 8-year-old daughter who'd been excited about her princess cake for weeks, and saw the hurt and confusion in those dark eyes. I paid in full 2 weeks ago," Danielle managed, her voice stronger now as maternal instinct overrode her shock. "I have the receipt right here. I ordered exactly what was shown in your catalog, and this isn't it." But Mr. Green had clearly decided the conversation was over. "Look, lady, I don't have time for this. The cake is fine. If you don't like it, you can take it up with corporate, but I'm not remaking anything. Next." He looked past her dismissively, as if she'd already disappeared. Several customers in line shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Danielle and the floor. She realized with growing horror that they were all just going to let this happen. They were going to stand there and watch her be humiliated, and then they were going to go on with their day as if nothing had occurred. The injustice of it, not just of the ruined cake, but of the casual cruelty, the public dismissal, the way Mr. Green felt comfortable speaking to her like she was less than human, settled over her like a suffocating blanket. "Mama, are we leaving?" Ava asked quietly, and Danielle heard something in her daughter's voice that broke her heart. Resignation. As if this was just how the world worked, as if this was normal. Behind them, the man in the navy suit had gone very, very still. Though Danielle was too upset to notice, his hands had clenched into fists at his sides, and his dark eyes were fixed on Mr. Green with an intensity that would have been alarming if the manager had been paying attention. But Mr. Green was already turning away, confident in his dismissal, ready to serve the next customer, as if nothing had happened. That's when everything changed. Danielle stood frozen at the counter, the weight of Mr. Green's dismissal pressing down on her like a physical force. Around them, the bakery's cheerful atmosphere continued unchanged. The espresso machine hissed, conversations resumed their normal volume, and customers moved past them as if nothing had happened. But for Danielle, the world had narrowed to the crushing realization that she was powerless to give her daughter what she'd promised. "Mama?" Ava's small voice cut through the fog of humiliation. "What's wrong?" Danielle looked down and felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. Ava was staring up at her with those wide, trusting eyes, but now there was something new there, a flicker of understanding that made her look older than her 8 years. Her small hand gripped Danielle's fingers with surprising strength, as if she could somehow hold her mother together through sheer force of will. "Nothing's wrong, baby," Danielle whispered, but her voice cracked on the lie. She could feel the hot sting of tears threatening to spill over, and she blinked rapidly, desperate not to cry in front of all these strangers. Not in front of her daughter. But Ava was too perceptive, too in tune with her mother's emotions after years of it being just the two of them against the world. "Is it because of what that man said? About people like us?" The innocent question hit Danielle like a punch to the gut. Her 8-year-old daughter had absorbed every cruel word, had understood the implications even if she couldn't fully grasp their meaning. The knowledge that Ava had witnessed her mother being treated as less than human, that she would carry this memory, made Danielle feel sick. "Ava, honey, he didn't mean..." Danielle started then stopped. What could she say? That the manager hadn't meant exactly what it sounded like. That the world wasn't actually full of people who would judge them based on the color of their skin. That wasn't true, and Ava deserved better than comfortable lies. Behind them, Michael Lawson remained motionless in line, but his attention was completely focused on the mother and daughter in front of him. He'd heard every word of Mr. Green's tirade, had seen the casual cruelty with which his employee had dismissed this woman. But it was watching the aftermath, seeing this little girl process her first real lesson in how unfair the world could be, that ignited something fierce and protective in his chest. Michael had built his business empire on the principle that everyone deserved to be treated with dignity and respect. He'd implemented policies across all his companies specifically to prevent situations like this. Yet here, in one of his own establishments, those values were being trampled under the feet of a manager drunk on petty power. "I worked so hard to save for your cake," Danielle whispered to Ava, her composure finally beginning to crack. "I picked up extra shifts, I saved every penny I could, because I wanted your birthday to be perfect. I wanted you to have the most beautiful princess cake, just like the ones those other little girls get." Ava's bottom lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she pressed closer to her mother's side, wrapping her thin arms around Danielle's waist. "It's okay, Mama. I don't need a perfect cake." The mature resignation in her daughter's voice broke something fundamental inside Danielle. This wasn't how childhood was supposed to work. Ava shouldn't have to comfort her mother. She shouldn't have to pretend that being treated poorly was acceptable. She shouldn't have to lower her expectations because the world had decided they didn't deserve better. "No," Danielle said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "It's not okay. You do deserve a perfect cake. You deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I can't." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I can't protect you from this. I can't shield you from the ugliness in the world. I can't give you everything you deserve." The tears came then, silent and unstoppable. Danielle pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to muffle the sob that threatened to escape. She felt like she was failing at the most basic job of motherhood, protecting her child's innocence and joy. Michael watched this private moment of heartbreak unfold, and felt his anger crystallize into something sharp and purposeful. This wasn't just about a poorly made cake, or even about one prejudiced employee. This was about a system that allowed people to be diminished and dismissed based on assumptions and biases. It was about a little girl learning that the world might not think she was worthy of beautiful things. But what struck him most was the dignity with which Danielle carried herself even in her moment of breakdown. She wasn't screaming or making demands. She wasn't causing a scene or seeking attention. She was simply a mother trying to give her daughter a special birthday, devastated by the realization that she might not be able to deliver on that promise. Ava reached up and gently wiped away one of her mother's tears with her small thumb. "Don't cry, Mama. We can go home and make our own cake. Remember when we made those cupcakes with the rainbow sprinkles? Those were good." The gesture was so tender, so selfless, that Michael felt his own eyes sting. This child was offering comfort to her mother, sacrificing her own disappointment to ease her parents' pain. In that moment, Michael realized this wasn't really about the cake at all. It was about preserving a little girl's faith in the world, about ensuring that a mother's love wasn't overshadowed by one man's cruelty. The dignity of this family, their grace under pressure, their love for each other, their quiet strength in the face of humiliation, stood in stark contrast to the ugly behavior they just endured. Michael knew he couldn't let this moment pass without action. Some things were too important to leave unaddressed. As Danielle gathered herself to leave, Michael made a decision that would change everything. Just as Danielle began to gather the ruined cake box and guide Ava toward the exit, a calm voice behind them cut through the ambient noise of the bakery. "Excuse me?" The voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable authority that made everyone within earshot pause. Danielle turned, surprised to find the well-dressed man who had been standing behind them in line now stepping forward. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 40s, with kind eyes that held a steely determination she hadn't noticed before. Michael Lawson looked directly at Mr. Green, his posture relaxed but his gaze unwavering. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding here. This lady ordered a premium Princess Castle cake, and what she received clearly doesn't match the quality standards your bakery advertises." Mr. Green's eyebrows shot up, his face flushing with irritation. "Sir, this is none of your business. I've already explained to this woman that the cake is exactly what she ordered. If you'll wait your turn." "Actually, it is my business," Michael interrupted smoothly, his tone remaining conversational despite the steel underneath. "I'm a customer here, and I'm watching you provide substandard service to another customer. It reflects poorly on the establishment." Danielle blinked in confusion. Why was this stranger defending her? She'd grown accustomed to being invisible in situations like this, to people looking the other way when she faced discrimination. The unexpected intervention left her uncertain how to respond. Michael turned slightly toward Danielle, offering her a gentle nod before addressing Mr. Green again. "I'd like you to rewrap that cake properly and treat this customer with the respect she deserves." Mr. Green's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "And who exactly do you think you are? Just another customer trying to play hero? Look, buddy, I've been managing this location for 5 years. I know how to run my bakery, and I don't need some random guy in a fancy suit telling me how to do my job." The words hung in the air, and Danielle noticed something shift in the stranger's expression. It was subtle, a slight tightening around his eyes, a barely perceptible straightening of his shoulders. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new edge that made several nearby customers glance over nervously. "Your bakery?" Michael repeated quietly, and something in the way he emphasized those 2 words made Mr. Green's confident smirk falter slightly. "That's right," Green replied, but with less bravado than before. "I'm the manager here, and I make the decisions about customer service. So unless you want to file a complaint with corporate, which I guarantee won't go anywhere, I suggest you mind your own business." Michael's smile was thin and didn't reach his eyes. "Corporate. Interesting you should mention that." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the bakery's interior with the careful attention of someone conducting an inspection. "Tell me, Mr. Green, how familiar are you with the company's customer service policies? Specifically, the zero-tolerance policy regarding discriminatory language and treatment?" The question seemed oddly specific, and Danielle noticed Mr. Green's face had gone slightly pale. Around them, the normal bakery chatter had died down as other customers sensed the tension escalating. I don't know what you're implying," Green stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I treat all my customers fairly." "Do you?" Michael's voice remained calm, but there was something almost predatory in his stillness. "Because from where I was standing, I heard you tell this lady that people like her should stick to cheap cupcakes. I'm curious what you meant by people like her." The direct confrontation sent a ripple of uncomfortable murmurs through the nearby customers. Several people had their phones out now, though whether they were texting or preparing to record wasn't clear. Danielle felt Ava press closer against her side, confused by the sudden shift in dynamics. Mr. Green's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not. You're taking my words out of context. I was simply trying to help her find products more suitable to her budget." "Her budget," Michael repeated, his tone suggesting he found that explanation lacking. "Based on what information exactly? Did you review her credit report? Her bank statements? Or are you making assumptions based on other factors?" The questions were delivered with surgical precision, each one designed to expose the flimsy foundation of Green's justifications. Danielle watched in fascination and growing confusion as this stranger, this man she'd never met, dismantled her humiliation with the skill of someone very familiar with corporate accountability. "Who are you?" Mr. Green finally asked, and for the first time since the confrontation began, his voice carried a note of genuine uncertainty. Michael's smile widened, but it still held no warmth. "I'm someone who believes very strongly in the importance of treating all customers with dignity and respect. Someone who takes it personally when those values are ignored." He paused, his gaze never leaving Green's increasingly pale face. "Someone who knows quite a bit more about how this establishment should be run than you might expect." The cryptic response sent a chill through the air. Danielle found herself studying this mysterious defender more closely, noting details she'd missed before. The impeccable cut of his suit, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself with the unconscious authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Most tellingly, she noticed how the other bakery employees had begun to gather at the edges of the scene, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. One of the younger staff members was whispering urgently into a phone, her eyes wide with what looked suspiciously like panic. Something was happening here, something much bigger than a simple customer complaint. And somehow, Danielle and Ava had found themselves at the center of it. The tension in the bakery was palpable as Michael maintained his steady gaze on the increasingly nervous Mr. Green. But rather than continue the confrontation, he turned back to Danielle with a disarming smile that seemed to diffuse some of the electricity in the air. "Ma'am, would you mind if I took a look at your receipt?" he asked gently. "Sometimes these situations can be resolved more easily when we have all the facts laid out clearly." Danielle hesitated, still bewildered by this stranger's intervention but sensing an ally where she'd expected none. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to Michael with uncertain gratitude. Michael studied the receipt with the focused attention of someone trained to spot discrepancies. His eyebrows raised slightly as he scanned the itemized charges. "This is interesting," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "You were charged $180 for the premium princess package, but there's an additional $25 specialty handling fee that isn't explained." "Specialty handling fee?" Danielle repeated, confused. "No one mentioned that when I placed the order. And this charge here," Michael continued, pointing to another line item. "Rush decoration surcharge $20, but according to the date on your receipt, you placed this order 2 weeks ago." "That's hardly a rush order." Mr. Green shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Those are standard fees. Sometimes they don't get explained properly during the ordering process." "Standard fees?" Michael repeated thoughtfully. He looked up from the receipt, his gaze sweeping across the other customers in line. "Excuse me," he called to a well-dressed woman standing a few people back. "I couldn't help but notice you have a similar cake box. Would you mind if I asked what you paid for your order?" The woman looked startled but answered readily. "Oh, it's the same Princess Castle cake. $180 exactly. My daughter loves anything with turrets and crowns." Michael nodded politely and turned to an elderly gentleman near the pastry display. "Sir, I'm sorry to bother you, but did you happen to purchase any custom-decorated items today?" The man held up a box containing what appeared to be a birthday cake decorated with sports themes. "Yes, the deluxe sports package. $175, and that included the rush fee since I needed it for tonight. Rush fee for same-day service," Michael noted aloud, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by everyone nearby. "That makes sense." He looked back at Danielle's receipt, then at Mr. Green. "But this lady ordered 2 weeks in advance, and was charged both a rush fee and a mysterious specialty handling fee. Can you explain the discrepancy?" The bakery had grown noticeably quieter as other customers began paying attention to the unfolding drama. Several people were now openly watching, and a few had their phones discreetly positioned as if recording. Mr. Green's face had gone from pale to slightly gray. "Look, different customers have different circumstances. Sometimes there are additional costs based on complications." "What kind of complications?" Michael pressed, his tone remaining conversational but his eyes sharp. Before Green could answer, one of the younger employees, a girl who couldn't have been more than 19, stepped forward from behind the pastry case. Her name tag read, Jessica, and she was wringing her hands nervously. "Mr. Green," she said quietly, "maybe I should explain about the..." "Jessica, get back to your station," Green snapped, but the girl continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. "About the code system," she finished, ignoring her manager's glare. "The one where we had extra charges to certain customers' orders." The admission sent a ripple of shocked murmurs through the gathered customers. Michael's expression remained neutral, but Danielle could see something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "Code system?" he inquired mildly. Jessica glanced nervously at Mr. Green, who looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. There's a system where we had certain fees based on." She struggled with the words. "Based on what Mr. Green calls risk assessment." "And how is this risk assessed?" Michael asked, though something in his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Another employee, an older woman named Margaret according to her name tag, had joined Jessica. "It's not right," she said firmly, years of suppressed frustration evident in her voice. "We've been told to add extra charges for customers who look like they might complain or cause problems. And how do you determine who might cause problems?" Michael's voice had taken on the quality of a prosecutor leading a witness. Margaret's eyes found Danielle's, and her expression was filled with regret. "We've been told to use our judgment about which customers are likely to be difficult." The euphemistic language fooled no one. Around the bakery, customers began exchanging uncomfortable glances, the ugly truth settling over them like a toxic cloud. Several people looked directly at Danielle with expressions of dawning understanding and shame. Michael folded Danielle's receipt carefully and handed it back to her. "So to be clear," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the now silent bakery, "this establishment has a systematic policy of adding arbitrary fees to certain customers' bills based on subjective risk assessment that appears to correlate with physical appearance." It wasn't a question, and no one bothered to deny it. Danielle felt sick. All those extra fees, all those times she'd been charged more than expected at various businesses, all those moments when she'd wondered if she was being paranoid, it turned out she'd been right to be suspicious. The knowledge was validating and devastating in equal measure. But as she looked at this mysterious man who had somehow managed to expose a system of discrimination in less than 10 minutes, she realized that today might be different. Today, someone with power was paying attention. Today, there might actually be consequences. The silence in the bakery stretched taut as everyone processed the implications of what had just been revealed. Michael stood perfectly still, his gaze moving methodically from Mr. Green to the employees who had spoken up, to the customers who were now recording with their phones held high. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an authority that seemed to fill every corner of the space. "I think it's time for some clarity," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a business card. But instead of handing it to anyone, he simply held it up so the embossed gold lettering was visible to everyone nearby. "My name is Michael Lawson," he announced, his voice clear and carrying. "I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Lawson Hospitality Group." The words hit the bakery like a physical force. Mr. Green's face went from gray to white as the blood drained completely away. Behind the counter, Jessica gasped audibly, her hand flying to her mouth. Margaret took an involuntary step backward, her eyes wide with shock and what looked like terror. That's impossible," Green stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't be. I mean, the CEO wouldn't just what?" Michael asked pleasantly. "Wouldn't visit one of my own establishments? Wouldn't stand in line like a regular customer to see how my employees treat people? Wouldn't care when I discover that my company's values are being systematically violated?" The revelation rippled through the gathered customers like wildfire. Phones that had been discreetly recording were now openly filming, their owners realizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. A few customers began backing away, sensing the dramatic shift in power dynamics, while others pressed closer, drawn by the unfolding corporate drama. Danielle felt her knees go weak. The mysterious stranger who had defended her wasn't just some random Good Samaritan, he was the CEO of the entire company. The man who ultimately owned this bakery, who employed everyone here, who had the power to change everything, had been standing behind her the whole time, witnessing her humiliation. "Lawson Hospitality Group," Michael continued, his voice carrying easily through the now silent bakery, "owns 47 establishments across the tri-state area. We employ over 800 people. Our mission statement, posted on our website and displayed in every location, promises exceptional service delivered with dignity, respect, and fairness to every customer, regardless of who they are or where they come from. He paused, letting the words sink in before continuing. What I've witnessed here today represents a complete and fundamental violation of everything this company stands for. Not just poor customer service, but systematic discrimination disguised as risk assessment, not just one employee's bad judgment, but an entire culture of prejudice that has been allowed to flourish unchecked. Mr. Green was now visibly shaking, his hands gripping the edge of the counter as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. Mr. Lawson, sir, I can explain. You can explain how you look at a mother trying to buy her daughter a birthday cake and decide she doesn't deserve the same treatment as other customers? Michael's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. You can explain how you implemented a secret pricing system that charges people more based on your personal biases? You can explain how you thought it was acceptable to humiliate a customer in front of her 8-year-old daughter? The questions came like hammer blows, each one stripping away another layer of Green's composure. Around them, customers murmured among themselves, some looking horrified, others nodding in approval at this dramatic reversal of fortune. Danielle found her voice at last, though it came out smaller than she intended. You were there the whole time. You heard everything he said to us. Michael turned to her, and his expression softened completely. I did. And I want you to know that what happened here today doesn't represent who we are as a company. It represents who we're going to stop being, starting right now. He faced the gathered employees, his voice carrying absolute authority. Mr. Green, you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the premises, and you can expect to hear from our legal department regarding the systematic fraud you've been perpetrating against our customers. Green's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. The man who had been so confident in his petty tyranny just minutes ago now looked like a deflated balloon. Jessica, Margaret, Michael continued, his tone gentler but still firm. I want full documentation of this code system, how long it's been in place, which customers were affected, how much money was involved. We'll be conducting a complete audit and issuing refunds to everyone who was overcharged. The two employees nodded rapidly, relief and fear warring on their faces. But it was when Michael turned back to Danielle that the full weight of the moment hit home. This powerful man, someone who could buy and sell establishments like this without a second thought, had chosen to stand up for her and Ava when no one else would. Ma'am, he said formally, on behalf of Lawson Hospitality Group, I want to offer you my sincere apology. What happened here today was unconscionable, and I intend to make it right. The bakery erupted into a buzz of whispered conversations and clicking cameras, but all Danielle could focus on was the fact that for the first time in a very long time, someone with real power had chosen to use it to defend her family's dignity. The next 20 minutes moved like a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. Michael had made a single phone call, speaking in quiet, clipped sentences that somehow conveyed both urgency and absolute authority. Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived, their presence lending an air of finality to Mr. Green's dismissal. This is ridiculous, Green protested as he was escorted toward the door, his voice cracking with desperation. You can't just fire me over one complaint. I've been managing this location for 5 years. I know these customers, I know how to handle. You know how to systematically defraud customers based on racial profiling. Michael cut him off coldly. Your lucky termination is all you're facing right now. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the criminal fraud charges we'll be filing. The words silenced Green completely. As the security guards ushered him out, the brass bells chimed his exit with an almost mocking cheerfulness. The customers who remained in the bakery watched in fascination as the man who had wielded his petty power so cruelly just an hour before was reduced to a cautionary tale. But Michael's attention had already shifted to more important matters. He knelt down to Ava's eye level, his intimidating corporate presence melting away as he smiled at the little girl who had been watching the proceedings with wide, confused eyes. Ava, right? He said gently. Today's your birthday? Ava nodded shyly, still pressed close to her mother's side but curious about this man who had somehow transformed their terrible experience into something that felt like victory. Well, that's very special. Birthdays deserve to be celebrated properly. Michael stood and addressed Jessica, who was still standing behind the counter looking shell-shocked. I want you to personally oversee the creation of a new Princess Castle cake for Ava. Use our master decorator, spare no expense, and I want it to exceed every specification from the original order. Can you handle that? Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir. Jessica replied, her relief at being given a chance to make amends evident in her voice. How long will that take? Our head decorator is here today. If we start immediately, probably 2 hours for something truly spectacular. Michael nodded and turned back to Danielle. I know you've already spent your day dealing with our failures, but would you be willing to give us a chance to make this right? I'd like to personally ensure that Ava gets the birthday celebration she deserves. Danielle felt overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of fortune. We don't need anything elaborate. Just the cake we originally ordered would be fine. With respect, ma'am, fine isn't what your daughter deserves. Michael replied firmly. She deserves extraordinary. Will you trust me to deliver that? Before Danielle could answer, Ava tugged on her mother's hand and whispered loudly. Mama, I think he's nice. Can we stay? The simple faith in her daughter's voice made Danielle's decision for her. Okay. We'll stay. What followed was unlike anything Danielle could have imagined. Michael didn't just disappear into some corporate office to oversee the damage control. Instead, he spent the afternoon personally ensuring that Ava's birthday became magical. He arranged for the bakery's party room to be decorated with princess themes, coordinated with a local toy store to deliver a collection of gifts that made Ava gasp with delight, and even hired a professional face painter who transformed the little girl into a genuine princess. But more importantly, he treated both Danielle and Ava with a respect and attention that felt healing after the morning's humiliation. He listened to Ava chatter about her favorite Disney princesses, admired the drawings she pulled from her backpack, and spoke to Danielle as an equal, asking about her work at the hospital, her thoughts on customer service, her experiences as a single mother. When the new cake was finally revealed, it was a masterpiece that exceeded anything from the bakery's catalog. 3 perfectly aligned tiers covered in flawless fondant, with delicate sugar flowers, edible pearls, and towers that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Ava's delighted gasp when she saw it made every adult in the room smile. Now this, Michael said, watching Ava examine every detail of her dream cake. This is what we should have delivered the first time. As the afternoon wound down, Michael pulled Danielle aside while Ava played with her new toys in the corner. I want you to know that what happened here today is going to have far-reaching consequences, he said seriously. We're launching a company-wide investigation into discriminatory practices at all our locations. We're implementing new training programs, new oversight procedures, and a customer advocacy system that will prevent this from happening again. Danielle nodded, still processing the magnitude of what had occurred. I never expected. I just wanted the cake I paid for. And that simple, reasonable expectation exposed something much larger. Michael replied. A systematic failure that was hiding in plain sight. Sometimes it takes one person being brave enough to stand up for what's right to illuminate problems that affect many people. As Danielle and Ava prepared to leave, Ava carefully carrying her magnificent cake while chattering excitedly about showing it to her friends, Michael walked them to the door. Thank you, Danielle said simply. Not just for the cake, but for seeing us. For caring enough to act. Michael shook his head. Thank you for giving us the chance to do better. And Ava? He knelt down one more time to address the birthday girl directly. Happy birthday, Princess. You deserve all the beautiful things in the world. As mother and daughter walked out into the afternoon sunshine, Danielle felt something she hadn't experienced in years. The confidence that came from being truly valued and respected. Behind them, the bakery hummed with new energy as employees worked under the watchful eye of their CEO to rebuild a culture based on dignity rather than discrimination. And in the weeks that followed, As news of the incident spread through social media and local news outlets, Sweetmore Bakery became known not as a place where prejudice was tolerated, but as an example of what could happen when leadership chose accountability over cover-ups. Sometimes, Michael reflected as he implemented changes across his entire company, the most important battles were won not in boardrooms or courtrooms, but at bakery counters, one act of courage at a time.